Dr. Gill, thanks for being here, man. Yeah, just before we like jump into some of the things we were talking about, I want to hear a little bit, and I'm sure students want to hear just kind of your story, like what brought you to CBU, why you enjoy teaching here, and teaching, interacting with students. Can you just kind of share with us a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. Initially it's just I needed a job,
Yeah,
but
don't we all?
but yeah, but,
Yeah.
but teaching higher ed is it's like a crazy market. There's like no jobs. It's so hard,
Dang.
and so I was just trying to take care of my family. Married at the time, I had two kids, so I was just working at a department store, selling women's jewelry and
Oh
watches.
wow.
Yeah, yeah. Thank God, I didn't like the job, but I'm very thankful for it. Um, and I wanted to study church history because when I was in grad school doing my master's, my professor of church history, he was just amazing.
Mm,
And what I loved is that he helped me to connect where I am today,
mm,
right at that time, to believers in the Bible. And like there's this big gap of time. And so I went to study, and by God's grace, I got a job here, and I wanted to teach. I wanted to teach. I wanted to work with people. Um, I care about people.
mm,
I care that these people want to learn, and they want to do something. They're hoping to do something in their life, and so
mm.
if there's anything I can do to just kind of help them with that,
Yeah.
is I'm just really thankful for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, been here since 2012. Uh, it's been a great
So you've
time.
been here for a minute.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's been a minute and a half. That's what it feels
Yeah.
like. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Dang, that's always like kind of how it happens too. You mentioning someone you really respected and influential person in your life that cared about church history, and
yeah.
maybe
So
kind of pass that on to you in a little, in some ways. I think that is similar for all of us when we are kind of choosing our career path. Is I think there are
mm,
those kind of people in our life that have a lot more influence than maybe we realize. And kind of helping us find our passion and
that's right.
that plays into it. So, man, so I know we were talking about this a little bit, just kind of what God's been, kind of putting on your heart and how he's been speaking to you lately. And I know we landed on this topic of love
Mm-hmm.
and kind of how it connects in the Bible. And so I'm not going to talk anymore. I just kind of want to hand it over to you and let you kind of introduce us to this idea of love and how God,
Yeah,
yeah, just,
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's so much to say about love, and Christians don't they're not the only ones with like the mic,
yeah,
like speaking about this topic,
yeah,
right?
that's
It's
fair.
not just even like other like religions, but like just culture and
Mm,
society, right? Music, pop culture. Everyone's talking about love, and so when you mention love, everyone kind of has an idea about it. But the Bible talks a lot about love,
mm,
and it's in the Old Testament, it's in the New Testament, um, and so the passage I want just kind of really thinking about today,
yeah,
and I think it really helps us to kind of like think about some things um, in kind of like community
mm,
is this passage in First John chapter 4 verses 7 and 8. Those are the ones I want to read.
mm,
Says, beloved, so this guy named John, he's writing to Christians,
yeah,
right? Christian community.
right,
He's not tweeting, right?
yeah,
This
yeah.
is
It's a
uh
specific audience.
specific
Yeah, he
audience,
has in
right?
mind. Yeah,
Right? Christian community. It
yeah.
says, beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God, and whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love.
Mm,
And he goes on more,
yeah,
but I'll pause there because I think there's a lot. There's a
that's
lot there.
yeah. That's a big statement. Those who
Yeah.
do not love do not know God because God is love.
Right. Right.
Uh,
So, the first thing that kind of stuck out to me in this, like the idea, is that God loves because He is love.
mm,
Right? He is love, and so He's saying, "Hey, love one another." Why? For love is from God. So,
mm,
God is the source of love, but this love is not like a possession or a tool,
mm,
right? So,
yeah,
I was telling you I was like changing the car battery right
yeah,
before, and I
yeah.
took my
So for context, your
oh yeah
son, your son's car
yeah
broke down. We were talking about this
yeah
right
yeah
before we
yeah yeah
started.
That's
son's
right.
car broke down or his battery died, right?
His
So
battery
yeah, you're changing
died,
it.
so I was like, in the parking lot, like kind of in the dark, and I brought my toolbox.
Yeah.
And these are things I don't have with me typically,
Mm-hmm.
but when I had like a goal in mind, I brought my tools.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Love is not like that when we speak about God. God is not like pulling out love from his utility belt,
Got
like
it.
when the moment is apt, right? When the moment
Yeah.
fits. Um, and one of my favorite comic book heroes growing up was Batman.
Mm.
I love that guy. I grew up watching reruns of like the Adam West old school
Oh yeah, the old one.
Batman.
Yeah.
You can tell like he wasn't quite as fit as like all the later
Yeah.
Batmans, and
Just like the spandex
yeah, the
and yeah.
spandex and no, 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 right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
he had the utility belt and he had a gadget that got him out of trouble every time, right? There was even a scene where they had like shark repellent, stuff like that, right? Like
Yeah.
shark repellent spray. They're like surfing, stuff like that. Um,
The bat shark repellent spray, or
yeah,
shark
yeah,
repellent bat spray, whatever
right,
they
right.
call it.
So actually, that was in the comic books, in the Lego movie, all this stuff. Anyway,
Dude, it's so funny.
and as cool as Batman is with all his gadgets, um, when we talk about God and what He has and what He gives us, right? This love is from God.
Mm-hmm.
It's not from His divine utility belt,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Because it says there later on, God is love, right? So God,
Mm-hmm.
when you talk about God's characteristics or His attributes,
Mm. Yeah.
right? It's not. Um, they're tied to His essence,
Yeah.
kind of like the core of who He is, and so yeah, this passage, God is love, is so profound.
Mm.
Is so profound. Um,
Yeah. It's funny because I think our culture to this word love has been diluted a lot in many ways, right?
right,
Because we
right.
use love for so many things.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
use it. For
yeah, well, it's like, I love my wife, right? I care very deeply about her. I love my kids, right? I also love the Lakers,
yeah.
and I love Mexican food, and
Oh
it's
yeah.
like,
Okay.
so there's
Right. Right.
like,
Right.
I think it's a word that we throw around so much that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes like we maybe forget the meaning of it. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious, like in your own, maybe interaction with students or just kind of observing just our culture as a whole, like what are some maybe like common misconceptions that people have about love, that might be like kind of
Yeah.
detached from this idea of like God is love, right?
Right. Right. I think one of the probably most common ones is reducing love to a feeling.
Mm,
Right.
yeah.
And so if love is just a feeling, and I'm not saying love doesn't include feelings,
Mhm.
right? It does
Yeah.
include feelings.
Yeah.
That's a part of it. We're feeling people, right? People who feel.
Hmm.
But if love is just a feeling, then love becomes really fickle,
Hmm.
like really fast.
Hmm.
And when like you talked about your wife, when I got married, we made promises to one another, these vows.
Hmm.
And those vows are tied around this idea that we're going to love each other.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not even just like love each other when things are great. It's like when things are not good,
Hmm.
right? So for richer or poorer, through sickness and health, like those kinds of things.
Hmm.
And man, when I'm sick, I don't feel in love with anyone,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
those feelings are not good. And so I think it's not tied to just feelings. I think that's one of the common
Yeah.
ones I
That's
think
good.
about,
That's
right?
good.
Yeah. Yeah. But, like I said, the feelings aren't bad. Like, you said, do you love Mexican food? I love Mexican food.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
Yeah.
I love bread.
Yeah.
I'll
Come
say
on. Come on.
that.
That's great. That's a great
Yeah.
reminder. Like we're feeling people. I think the danger is sometimes maybe we let our emotions rule over us,
Right.
instead of really the way that God intended them to be, as more of just a kind of like a check engine light of what's going on inside of us, maybe, or reminders of what God is doing. It's funny how I think this is super relevant, for students that I know I've had conversations where several students have felt like, man, I just don't feel like God is present in my life. It's this word feel that comes up. And I always say, man, like, don't let your emotions dictate whether you believe God is present or not. Like, God is always active and working in your life,
Right.
even then sometimes we might not feel it, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
they can be a great indicator, but also it's like if we place too much trust in them sometimes, then, we can maybe lose sight of.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think one thing is like I want to be thankful for my feelings.
Yeah.
Like when I feel like just kind of going back to the illustration of my wife, like when I'm feeling so in love with her, which is like, most of the time,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I'm thankful for those feelings.
Yeah.
That I'm not a robot,
Hmm.
right? But at those times when I gotta show up when I don't feel like showing up,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
She needs me. And maybe I'm just tired. Maybe I had too much Mexican food, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
too much sourdough bread.
Yeah. For real.
And she needs me. I gotta show up. I gotta show my love for her,
Mm.
even when I'm not feeling it.
Mm.
And it's no less real.
Yeah.
It's no less real.
Yeah.
I think friendships,
Mm.
right? Things like that. Friends don't always feel like showing up,
Yeah.
but when they show up, man, it shows something about their love for you as a friend.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but it's hard. It's hard when you don't feel it.
Yeah.
And when you talk about God, like I don't feel God's love for me, that's hard. It's really
Mm-hmm.
hard for someone who's not experiencing that kind of down feeling, the absence of feeling,
Yeah.
and then hearing someone who's experienced like they're in the thick of it
Yeah.
in this absence. It's really hard to empathize with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's really easy for us to say, hey, don't depend on your feelings. Right? It's
Mm.
easy to
Yeah.
say that,
Yeah. It's
right?
fair. Yeah.
I'm not saying that's wrong advice. I agree. Like
Yeah.
I say that too.
Yeah.
But I think one thing I have to remind myself all the time is like, man, it's so easy for me to say it, but I know what it's like to try to hear that,
Yeah.
and it doesn't always ring true, right?
Right.
It doesn't ring true,
It's kind of
but it
like
is.
can be void of like real empathy or
Yeah, that's
yeah,
true. That's
yeah.
true. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's a fair point.
yeah.
And
So, but no, it's true though. You're right.
yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so this idea like God is love, right?
Mhm.
And then John talks about, this idea of connects it to knowing God. I'm
Right.
curious about that. Like what are your thoughts on
Yeah.
this idea of like knowing
Yeah.
God and
Knowing
the fact
God.
that God is
So,
love?
it's like if you love one, you should love one another because because God's love and God.
Yeah.
But then it says like if you don't love, you don't know God, right?
Mm.
Like God is not in you and things like that. And so the idea of knowing God, we talk about knowing, like we're all about knowledge right now,
Yeah.
right? Like if you're having dinner with friends and someone says like, starts talking about some weird fact
Mm.
and someone disagrees, what's everyone going to do? They're going to pull out their phone and they're going to start Googling,
Yeah.
right? They're going to Wikipedia that stuff.
Yeah.
And knowing God, it's not stopping at the Wikipedia page,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
That's not what knowing God's about.
Hmm.
That's just knowing about him, right? It's just
Interesting.
knowing some facts about him.
Yeah.
And anyone can do that,
Hmm.
right? You just flip through the Bible.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, yeah, God made stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's a difference between God making something, God creating something, and God creating something with purpose to be in relationship with Him because He loves them. And so, like, that's one of those things, kind of bring it back into love.
Yeah.
And so, to know, like, if I run into, like, if I'm having a conversation with someone,
Hmm.
and they're just telling me some stuff about their life, I think that's something. I know something that they're going through.
Yeah.
But when my son tells me about what's going on in his life, there is like an existing relationship,
Mm. Yeah.
and the things I know about him are like tied to my love for him and his love for me. Ideally, when I'm at
Yeah.
my best,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that was the best illustration,
No, that's good.
but yeah, I think definitely, and also the idea that man, knowing God, it actually changes us.
Hmm.
Like that's the kind of knowing John's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a knowing that actually it does something to you,
Yeah.
not just like mere influence.
Hmm.
I think it's like transformation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, I love that you mentioned this because you said it, and I was like, whoa, knowing about God versus actually knowing God, right? Man, I think that is something that's really easy to do, especially at a place like California Baptist
Right,
University, right?
right.
Where you can know, and maybe you grew up in church, like where you know all of the stories, about God, and maybe a little bit about his character. But I love that you separate those as like there's a difference between knowing stuff about God, right? This like head knowledge, and then there's a
Right.
difference between where it's like, okay, now I actually know God. There's an existing relationship there, and it's transformative. Like I love
Right.
that because I think that's sometimes we can get confused and think that we're in a relationship with God when actually it's very what's the word I'm looking for? It's just very transactional.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah, that's
mean?
right. That was the word that was coming to my head.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
It's just like, okay, I'm gonna
Right.
know things and I'm gonna pray and ask, and I know this about God, so I know if I ask, maybe He'll give me this. And
Hmm.
but man, it's so much different from 'cause, yeah, the parent illustration is always so good
Hmm.
because like I love my kids and I love that my kids want to spend time with me and don't just ask me for things. Like I'm always going to provide for them,
Yeah.
right? But my daughter also loves she loves to do like puzzles and all these things that I like to do too. Like we'll play board games together,
Okay.
because I love those things too. And so she
Yeah.
wants to spend time with me. So I think it's a great
Yeah. Yeah.
illustration. But
It's the transactional part is yeah, we I think we all do that sometimes. Right.
mm-hmm.
And one of the things is also like, if I do this, God will forgive me.
Yeah,
And so I can just do whatever I want to do because I know if I just pay the price, like do
mm-hmm.
this action, God will forgive me.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, in the Bible, in the Old and New Testament, so not even just in the New Testament,
Mm-hmm.
the Old Testament, like one of the great command, the one that Jesus points back to in Deuteronomy, God says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your strength, all your mind."
Mm-hmm.
And so that's that is awesome, And God even
Yeah.
says, I think it's in Leviticus, or no, this is in the this might be in Hosea. God says, I want your steadfast love,
Mm.
not your sacrifices.
Yeah.
I don't want just you going through the motions if there's not love and devotion there.
Mm.
And so that's not just something God, like a desire God puts in our heart, like we want to be loved. God's desire is in covenant with us for us to love Him.
Mm.
And so um, that's wonderful.
Yeah. I'm going to throw a curveball at you.
Oh, no.
Let's get practical a little bit because I
Okay.
think
Yeah. Yeah.
this idea of love, it's very like sometimes very ethereal and
Yeah.
just kind of
Yeah.
ambiguous. So I want to get a little bit more in the weeds here.
Hmm.
Um, you mentioned that passage in Deuteronomy, love the Lord your God, all your heart, mind, strength. Jesus brings that up in Matthew 22
Hmm.
when someone asks, "Hey, what's the greatest commandment?"
That's right.
And I don't know if this connects, but I'm going to try. So Matthew 22, he says, "Hey, what's the greatest commandment?" And Jesus says, "Well, it's love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your strength." And then he takes it a step further, right? And
Hmm.
he says, the second is like it, right? Love
Right.
your neighbor as yourself. And so he connects
Hmm.
it to this idea of loving God and loving others,
Right.
right?
Right.
So how do we do that? Like
Yeah.
um, how do we do
Yeah.
that well?
Yeah. I think what John's writing in the passage we looked at,
Mm-hmm.
he's not just like making this stuff up,
Yeah.
right? He's taking it from Jesus's teachings
Mm,
and from teachings that from the Hebrew scriptures,
yeah.
and so um, it's absolutely tied together.
Mm,
It is definitely not like divorce; like they just happen to be talking about things that kind of have some correlation.
yeah.
And so loving the Lord kind of with everything you have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Jesus, like God doesn't just give, like we don't love God with just like a piece of ourselves. Like God doesn't just get a slice of the pie.
Mm,
He wants everything.
mm,
And so if people are like, man, I don't know, it's like Christianity just seems like you got to just give so much. Actually, it's more than that, right? You have to
mm,
give a lot, right? You
yeah.
have to give everything. And so love God with everything. And so out of that, then, right? So out of that knowing God, because God is love,
Yeah.
right? And so responding to Him in that way, out of that, we are now, I think, a couple things, able to
Mm,
and characterized by
mm,
love for others.
mm,
And so I think the able to part's really important because don't think, I don't believe that we are able to love in the way that God shows us what love is apart from knowing him and being transformed by him.
Yeah.
And so he enables us to do that. But then he's like, man, if this is real, if you're confessing Jesus, if you're saying this is who I am, then show it. Right? And this is not optional.
Yeah.
Right? It's not
Yeah.
just like one day a week, like
Yeah.
Sunday Christian. It's not just on, when you feel like it. It's the hard times when you don't feel like it.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know if that kind of answered your question.
Yeah,
right?
it does.
Those are just some thoughts.
It does. Yeah. Basically, it's hard to do.
I think it's impossible.
Yeah.
I think apart from God,
good.
it's impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's because I think we talk about love. So love seems like a really accessible concept, like or practice, because we all do it. We all love, right? But the kind of love God's talking about, I think that is apart from Him, it's really impossible.
Dang.
And so when God says love, that command to love, He's asking us to do something that we can't do apart from Him. And so what do we have to do? We have to depend on Him for these things.
Dang.
So yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah. Is there someone, I'm going to ask like a more personal question.
Right.
Is there someone in your life that you've seen do this really well?
Man, thankfully, so many people.
Yeah.
Right? So many people. I don't know if this is the best example, but like the one that comes to my mind is a friend of mine. Been friends for a long time. We were friends in church. He and his family have left to be missionaries somewhere else. So I'm not going to say like where and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I remember one time I was asking him, I said, hey man, when you think about people in our church, what do you think? Like what comes to mind? And he just said, at first, right, he didn't have to think about it. He said, I love them so much. I love them so much. And that's not always a normal thing to say. You know, it's like, especially when you're really involved, they might be like, man, I'm like frustrated, I'm tired, I'm burnt out.
Yeah.
People ask and then, like they don't listen, like or that kind of thing, right? But he's just like, I love them. Like that. And I think that was so helpful for me to hear.
Yeah.
It was encouraging, but also so helpful because that's a great starting point.
Yeah.
Like if I love them, that's going to shape all my interactions with them. Right?
Yeah.
Then, man, I'm going to give them time.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I be patient with them? Why wouldn't I give them the benefit of the doubt? Why wouldn't I want the best for them?
Yeah.
Right? In terms of like their pursuit, like following Jesus. And, and so anyway, that was one thing that kind of just came to my mind. That popped to my head.
That's good.
It was really helpful.
Man. So we gotta kind of wrap up, but I want to ask you one more thing just real quick. What's like a, maybe just like a practical challenge that you would give to students who are maybe, I don't know, maybe just wanting to grow in this. I think we all want to grow in this, right?
Right.
I feel like I'm always deficient in love at times, but yeah, like what, maybe some helpful practices or things that you've kind of worked through in your own life, or maybe advice you've gotten from others. Like how do we do this well?
Man, I think probably a few things.
Yeah.
The first one's going to probably sound not as practical as you want, maybe, but just that idea of knowing God. Like that's like the highest goal of the Christian life is to know God.
Yeah.
But sometimes, maybe a lot of times, we treat knowing God as like the first step to reach something better. If I know God, that will enable me to become a better person.
Yeah.
Right? Or affect more people, impact more people.
Yeah.
That's not the main goal.
Dang.
The main goal is knowing God. And so to grow in love, I think we have to grow in our, not just knowledge of who God is, but like spending time with Him, right? And so prayer, reading the Bible, I think those are so important. Those are key things. Those aren't things that I'm like, I got down, and so I'm just gonna, hey, you guys should do this too, right? These are
Yeah.
things that Scripture teaches us like we
Yeah.
should be doing. And so spending time with Him, and then another one in terms of like how do we like love other people more? A couple things like just remembering that man, they are just they're created with worth,
Mm.
right? If we believe in the God of the Bible, we're
Mm-hmm.
like, man, God made these people,
Yeah.
and so why would I not love them? There's nothing they lack in terms of value
Mm.
as creating an image of God. So
Mm.
there's worth there. I need to love them. But also, I think maybe in like tighter communities, in personal relationships, it's kind of practical thing. We do a lot like premarital counseling, things
Yeah.
like that. One
Yeah.
of the things we talk about is like giving the people you love the benefit of the doubt,
Mm.
not in a naive way,
Yeah.
right? So if someone's like struggles with addiction and they like are, handling the stuff that
Yeah.
they struggle with,
Yeah.
don't just be like, oh, surely he's just, that's not affecting you, right? But
Yeah.
I'm not talking about naive.
Yeah.
But, like it's so easy to feel this suspicion,
Mm.
take things the wrong way, all
Mm-hmm.
this stuff. I struggle with that all the time.
Yeah.
And so to really actively kind of, I think positively,
Yeah.
optimistically about them,
Yeah.
right? And so if it could be taken bad or good, I'm gonna try to take it bad or good. I'm gonna try to
Yeah.
take it good
Yeah. Yeah.
because I know that person. I know that
Mm.
person loves me,
Yeah.
right?
Dang.
And I respect that person. Why is it the first thing my mind goes to is like the worst interpretation,
Yeah. Like the
right?
cynical.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cynical things like that. And so
Wow.
I think to love them actively in that way, and I
Mm.
think that helps us to be patient too. It's like, all right,
Wow.
I'm still feeling a bit shaky. I'm going to take it the good way,
Yeah.
but let's talk about it. Can we
Yeah.
talk about it? And so now we can actually talk about it. But if I'm angry, I've taken it the wrong way.
Man.
I don't even want to talk about it
Yeah.
because now I think you've written me off, so I'm going to write you off, right? So
Mm.
now we're just blacklisting everyone.
Yeah.
And I think within the community of faith, especially, right, the body of Christ, the church, why are we doing that?
Mm.
It's a bit crazy to me,
Yeah.
right? But like social media is full of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Cynicism's everywhere,
right,
man.
and we see that in the local church. We
Yeah.
see that, and it's hard. I don't want to make it sound like it's so easy,
Right.
and that's why I'm saying
I
love is
appreciate
like the hardest thing,
Yeah.
right? It's the
Yeah.
greatest thing, but it's also the hardest thing.
Mm.
And so, yeah. So those are just a couple things. I don't know if
That's
that's
great.
maybe I'm sure there are other things, and I'm definitely not the expert in like practical methods for
Sure.
developing all these things. But
Yeah.
those are some things that help me
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's a huge topic, but I feel like you've given us something to grasp onto, this idea of knowing God versus just knowing about God, like how that can transform our actual character and who we are as a person. I love just this idea of rejecting cynicism and embracing optimism towards people. I think that's a word, bro. Like,
Yeah.
it's just, I think that's very relevant. Man, thank you so much for coming in and sharing a little bit, and
Oh, my pleasure.
appreciate you, man.
Yeah.
It's always a pleasure. So, we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for watching.